Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy. I played this through a PlayStation 4 disc. Luckily, it includes a free upgrade to the PlayStation 5, although I couldn't notice that much of a difference between the PlayStation 4 version and the PlayStation 5 version. If you've seen any of the movies, you should be fairly familiar with what you can kind of expect from this game. The Guardians of the Galaxy are basically this motley crew of these mercenary type of people in outer space. They kind of work a lot like sometimes bounty hunters, and sometimes they aren't always up to the most morally, objectively good task, but they do try to be heroes at the end of the day. You may be a little thrown off if you play this game after watching all of the MCU movies, because it is not really based off of the MCU, it's more based off of the comic books of Guardians of the Galaxy. And so the characters may look a little different than what you're familiar with, and story-wise, lore-wise, it's going to be different than what you've seen in the MCU. One of the biggest differences in this one is Thanos has already been defeated before the beginning of this game, and it was actually Drax the Destroyer who defeated him. And so I feel like I get the impression like Thanos was a big threat, but not as big of a threat as he was in the MCU. As this game starts out, the Guardians of the Galaxy are established. It's not an origin story, but they are still fairly new. They're still getting used to each other and getting used to working with each other, and you kind of see the bonds between the Guardians slowly form as you are playing through the game, till you get to the end of the game and they're all saying I love you and they're all working together. Because I am such a fan of the MCU, it was a little strange playing through this game for the first time, just because these aren't the type of Guardians that I'm necessarily used to. But having beaten the game now, I can honestly say that I like the portrayal of these Guardians a lot better than their portrayals in the movies. They just feel a lot more rounded, not so much flat characters as they are portrayed in the movies. I like a lot of characters a lot more in this video game. For instance, Drax the Destroyer, I feel like he's pretty one note in the movies. He's just a super strong guy who takes things super literally, but I feel like this game actually dives a lot more into his character. He's not so dumb as the movie portrays him to be. He's obviously very much grieving for his family that Thanos had taken from him, and I actually feel like they did a good job fleshing out all of the Guardians, aside from, well, maybe Groot, but what can you really do with Groot when the only words he ever says is I am Groot? But it does a fairly good job going into the backstory of all the characters. Peter Quill, who is Star-Lord, like the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. You even get several flashbacks to his time as a teenager on Earth and how he got his magical pistols. And you do a fair bit of content diving into each of the characters' backstories as well, and you get to learn a little bit more about them. If somebody wasn't familiar at all with the Guardians of the Galaxy, I would actually recommend that they play this game first before they watch the movies, because this portrayal, I just think it does a lot better of a job, surprisingly. Initially, I actually played this game before I watched Guardians of the Galaxy 3 years ago, and I felt like this game did a lot better job showing off the character Adam Warlock than the movie did. As far as the overall story for this game, basically there is almost like this parasitic thing that can basically turn all of the people in the universe into mindless slaves by offering them a fake promise where they are living out their wildest dreams in their heads, but in reality they're basically just like a mindless cult for this thing. And so it's up to the Guardians of the Galaxy to reject this promise and all of its cult leaders in order to take it down and ultimately save the galaxy. Tonally, I really like it though. It's exactly what you want from the Guardians of the Galaxy. They're this crew that is down on their luck. Nothing ever really seems to be going their way, and so they have to take all these odd end jobs and just try to keep their head afloat from all these troubles. To tie into this, as far as the video game goes, you're often encountered as Star-Lord trying to navigate these dialogue options in order to provide the best possible outcome. Now, granted, I'm sure a lot of these dialogue options ultimately don't change too much as far as the gameplay goes. Basically, you're choosing how you respond to characters, what kind of choices do you want to make as you are navigating through space. Do you want to pay your fine? Do you want to ignore it? Do you want to hide this space llama that you found, or do you want to hide this illegal weaponry that Rocket has on board? And so you make these choices, and ultimately I don't think that it affects the gameplay too much, but it is fun story-wise, and it is fun feeling like you have some kind of a say in terms of how the story plays out. I noticed that there were a couple small occasions where, based on how you answer, it affects whether you get like a harder combat area afterwards, but it really doesn't affect it too much. Honestly, a lot of the times I was kind of tempted to give like the jokey, silly answer, just because comedically I think this game is also very funny. I can never quite bring myself to do the jokey, silly answers though, just because I'm usually, when I'm playing video games, I'm trying to go for like the best possible outcome that will give me the most net positive results. And so usually I couldn't force myself to do the silly answer, but I was tempted a lot of the time. As far as the actual combat goes, you will be mainly assuming the control of Star-Lord and his magical pistols. And this is actually kind of a unique combat system where it is a third-person shooter at its core, but then there's a couple different things that you are constantly doing as you're doing this third-person shooter gameplay. Basically, like, your pistols can change their elements, so you'll occasionally encounter like an enemy with a blue bubble around them, which means that you need to turn on your ice element for your pistols, or if it's red, then you need to turn on your fire element for your pistols. So you're doing that. You're also, whenever your pistols need to like cool down, you're trying to trigger that like perfect reload kind of thing, very similar to Gears of War. And then in addition to this shooter gameplay, you are basically commanding yourself and the 4 other Guardians of the Galaxy to use their abilities. So whenever their ability comes off of cooldown, you can kind of command them to do various things, and you can slowly unlock new abilities. They're basically working like talent points, so as you level up, you unlock a new talent point, which means that you can potentially unlock a new ability for either a Rocket, Groot, Drax, or Gamora. And this is where the majority of your damage will be coming from, is these abilities that come off of cooldown. Enemies also have a stagger bar, and once the stagger bar is full, then you can execute like this cool move using all the characters as they beat up the bad guy. By the end of the game, assuming that you have all of these abilities unlocked, and if you just play through the game, odds are you probably will, you will be doing a ton of damage as long as anytime these abilities come off of a cooldown, you use them. It's pretty easy to take down the enemies, and I rarely ever found myself in the danger zone in terms of health, as long as you are really abusing those abilities. Plus, Star-Lord also gets like a ton of health, assuming that you're doing all the upgrades possible, and he eventually gets like abilities that makes him invulnerable and stuff. So really, you don't have to worry too much about the difficulty unless you adjust it higher than what the default difficulty is. In terms of upgrades, you're doing these talent points to unlock new abilities, but you can also find these resources hidden through these nooks and crannies. It's a fairly linear single-player game, but occasionally there are these little hidden areas that you can find these resources, and then Rocket can upgrade your gear. And by the end of the game, I had everything upgraded, both in terms of abilities and all the possible upgrades that Rocket could do, and I can guarantee you that I didn't find all the resources, so I think it's pretty much a guaranteed thing that you will 100% unlock everything that you possibly can. Are all of the upgrades exciting? No, not necessarily. Like, some of the stuff is, oh, increase your health 25% or whatever, and you're probably not going to use all of the abilities that you do unlock. You're going to have your go-tos, but it is kind of satisfying just 100% unlocking everything and feeling that power curve as you play through the game. Now, the really cool thing about this combat that makes it stand apart is you have this separate meter that once it fills up, then you can give the Guardians of the Galaxy a quick little pep pep talk. Basically, your allies will come up, they'll say a couple things, and then you have 2 different options that you can choose to respond. If you respond the correct way, basically give your teammates like a little pep talk, tell them that like, yeah, it's awesome that we're doing good, but don't lose your head. Or if they're feeling discouraged, then you can kind of pump them up and boost their confidence. Then you will play a song, and so you get to listen to this like song, not from the Guardians of the Galaxy, but like a real song. Like you'll listen to Tears for Fears or Rick Astley or something like that, and you'll get to listen to that music as you're doing that combat scenario. And that was always exciting. It's really fun playing through this combat, listening to all these really great tracks. It almost became a game of not necessarily using this superpower when I needed it, because I rarely ever needed it. It became a game of when do I want to use this on a really big encounter so that I can listen to more of the song, because I feel like a lot of the times I do this thing, I start listening to the music, and then I only get to listen to maybe like the first 20 seconds of the song before the combat scenario is over. But you also don't want to hoard onto this special ability because you want to use it as much as you possibly can. And so it was kind of fun. It was like a game like, is this going to be a longer battle encounter, or is this going to be something super short that I don't want to waste this super ability on? By the end of the game, it did start repeating some of these motivational speeches, and the music did start repeating it as well. I didn't mind so much the repeating tracks, but I do wish that I could kind of skip the whole speech scenario and just go straight back into the combat, because it's like I've heard these speeches over and over again by this point. In terms of the music though, you do get plenty of opportunities to hang out on your spaceship, and this is where you can go to like the speaker and you can choose what song you want to play, which is nice. It really does have a great soundtrack, and I feel like for a Guardians of the Galaxy game, you need a really good soundtrack. During this time, you can also like walk around, talk with all your teammates, see what they're doing. Like Drax will be sitting there with his reading glasses, reading a book, or you can go and talk to this space llama that you rescued, or you could just interact with other characters. As you play through the game, you can potentially find these artifacts that will unlock more dialogue options that will reveal more about like the character's history. The spaceship slowly changes based on where you're at in the story as well. There's a fridge door that keeps propping open, so you got to keep closing it. I don't know if that does anything or not, but it's just something to do as you have this more relaxed spaceship time. I do like that this game is fairly linear. I feel like the linear gameplay lends itself more to great storytelling compared to something like an open world game would. It does mean that this game feels a little shorter to what maybe a lot of people are used to in a AAA game. It took me about like 15 hours to play through all of the game, which is totally fine for me, but others may feel like they aren't getting the best bang for their buck. It's a very entertaining game, not only in terms of the story, but also in like the characters' interactions with each other, because like the banter is very funny, the way that they're always like teasing each other. It's very comedic. All of the characters, not just the Guardians of the Galaxy, but you'll encounter lots of funny characters. You'll encounter the dog Cosmo, who talks with like a deep Russian accent. He's always a fun character. I really liked Mantis's portrayal in this game as well, compared to her movie counterpart. I don't know, it's like, it feels like a lot of the characters in this game are a lot more capable than their MCU counterparts, which also makes them more likable in my opinion, but they still are these ragtag down on their luck type of people. I think it's funny how like when you are exploring these hidden paths, these nooks and crannies, like the characters will always give you a hard time, like, oh, surprise, surprise, Peter's going off on his own again. And it's just funny how it is like a reoccurring bit, and they have these like made up swear words like flark. It just makes this banter even more silly. They tread the line of having this silly, humorous gameplay and interactions without making it seem super dumb, and without diluting the weight of the story, the severity of the story. Now, I do feel like this game could use a little more time in the oven. It felt maybe a little rushed, and I think this is what's going to separate this game from being a great game to being an amazing game. For instance, this dialogue that I keep praising, it keeps getting cut off unless you stand like perfectly still and listen to what the characters have to say. Because if you are just going as these characters are talking to each other, they're constantly going to get cut off and interrupt each other, and the dialogue, I think, just needs to be ironed out so you are able to consistently play through the game and listen to everything that the characters have to say. I also feel like there is a lot of technical issues. I never really encountered anything too game breaking, but you know, you'll get characters that just like teleport to the places that they need to be, and it kind of is illusion breaking in that way. Sometimes like the subtitles don't appear, sometimes the characters don't actually say the lines that they're supposed to, and it just skips it. The sound mixing in general, I think, needed a little bit of work, because yeah, I really like the music and the soundtrack in this game, but sometimes it's way loud and you can barely hear what the characters are saying. But other times the characters will be super loud, and like when you do your super power up where you play a song, it's super quiet. And so it's just weird. Like even when I was playing around with the audio settings, I could never get them just where I want them to be, where I can listen to the music but also hear what the characters have to say. Lots of visual glitches in that way. And like I said earlier, I never really encountered anything too game breaking. There was one time where it thought that I was still in combat and I couldn't find the enemy, and so I had to restart to the last checkpoint. Not a big deal, because they are very generous with the checkpoints, and so not the end of the world. But I don't know, it just felt like it wasn't a very polished game. The ending of this game, story-wise, did feel a little bit rushed, and I didn't really get that payoff that I was looking for. But like, despite all of that glitchy, unfinished mess, I had a really fun time playing this game. Gameplay-wise, it's really engaging. Story-wise, it's engaging. Humor-wise, it's got all of that. It just needed a couple more months in the oven just to polish everything up. I think that's why I'm going to give this game a 4 out of 5. It was so close to being a 5 out of 5, but I just can't. Like, it just needed a little bit more work. Well guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Oh, so now I don't express myself proper like? You know what? You're a real piece of What do you think I was gonna say? Rocky, dude, woof. We should have woofed you in when we woofed the chance. Like, woof we are. You don't, woof, woof, woof. What? You rough in front of me? I told you a bajillion times, I'm not a rough animal! What are you talking about? You woof, woof, woof.